okay, I have a child support obligation. Can it ever change? Can it go up? Can it go down?
Nope, absolutely not. You're stuck with whatever you get stuck with.
Hello, my name is Martin Sliwinski. I'm an attorney here at Mendez. I practice in the Domestic Relations Division, dealing with cases relating to families of all sorts. And this is my colleague here, Leo.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. I'm Leo Sokolov. I'm also an attorney here at Mendez, and I do everything Marty does.
Perfect. Yeah, and so the name of this podcast is I Do Until I Don't,
Very creative name.
which is a very clever name penned by Mr. Marvin Mendez, who's a partner here at the firm.
Give him credit for that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I think it's clever at least. And so this specific session deals with most popular questions. As attorneys, we have consults, we have clients, and they come in and they have these repeated questions over and over again. And so I thought it would be helpful to share that information with the public so that these common questions can be answered. And so today's session specifically deals with the matter of child support. And so one of the most popular questions, and I've devised a list of 5 that were very carefully construed with a lot of data,
A lot of
analysis.
scientific method that you just came up with.
No, I just pulled them out in my personal experience, and if you have additional questions, you can always add them as well. But the first is, and I'll pose this to you, Leo, in your practice, how does parenting time affect child support?
Okay, so yeah, very good question. I do get asked that quite often. So right now, the way the statute is written is parenting time significantly impacts child support, depending on how many overnights each parent has. So prior to the new statute being implemented several years ago, there was a statute that basically just had a percentage based on how many kids each party had, and whoever was paying child support, there was a percentage of their income was being paid. For one child was one number, for 2 children it was 2, 3, 4, and so on. And so the parenting time didn't really impact it, but now that the statute was changed, and I think for the good, because it kind of reflects more of the realistic kind of situations people run into in day-to-day life, the parenting time does impact it. So the magic number that you'll have, if you hire an attorney, they'll be talking about is 146 overnights. And the reason they talk about that is because once the paying parent, whoever's paying the child support, hits 146 overnights or more, their child support will decrease. And the theory kind of behind that is the more parenting time the paying parent has, they're spending more money on day-to-day expenses for the child, and so instead of having to pay more child support to the other parent and have those expenses, they kind of offset each other. So, and it goes all the way up to, a 50-50 parenting schedule where you have 182 or 183 overnights, and then depending on the incomes, it could be a 0 support order, it could be very minimal if the incomes aren't, drastically far apart from the 2 parties.
Okay, and I think a natural follow-up question that I receive in my experience is, okay, well, if parenting time is 50-50, equal, so child support is 0? Well, not necessarily. And so if one party is earning significantly and substantially more than the other party, let's say one party, for example, is earning $300,000 a year and the other party is unemployed, the court may still take into consideration that disparity in the financial resources and circumstances and still order some sort of child support amount. The idea being is that part of the child support component is the party's financial ability to provide for the resources of the child in their possession and control. And this works the other way as well. You may be in a situation where you don't have substantial amount of parenting time and you're also paying a substantial amount of child support. And so I think that's an important consideration to make as well.
How long does a parent receive child support for, and can it go beyond 18? So it's a little follow-up.
Oh, so most individuals come to me and they say, oh, when my child turns 18, child support is done. And that's not the exact way that the statute is written. The statute says it is either when the child turns 18 or when they finish graduation, no later than the age 19. That is when child support terminates. So to provide a practical example, is if your child turns 18 during their senior year, but they haven't graduated yet, the court will extend the support obligation until the date of graduation. Now, if they graduate and then they're going to turn 18 later, the court will wait until their actual birth date.
But no event past 19. So if the child is still in high school past 19, you're not getting child support.
Correct. Well, there's always an exception
Yeah.
to the rule. That's the one thing you learn about attorneys is that there are exceptions.
Okay.
One of those would be children with severe mental disabilities or health concerns that would warrant a deviation from that duration.
Yeah.
Again, this is not the day-to-day
Right.
common case, but there are always those sort of options.
Yeah. And then, is there different types of child support where a parent who is receiving financial support for a child who is in high school or before the age of 19, if that child, goes to college possibly or anything like that, is there an avenue for the recipient parent to receive some sort of additional financial support from the other side, or to be required to contribute to any college expenses or anything like that?
Yeah, so the statute provides for, the Section 513
Yep.
provides for college contribution. And so in Illinois, parents still have an obligation to provide for expenses post-high school. That may look like tuition, room and board, fees, books, supplies, and of the sort. There's also extraordinary expenses. Those may include things such as extracurriculars. If your child is a soccer star, then there are expenses that may be associated with that component. And so the court will not necessarily, and not typically, award an additional stipend or increase the monthly amount, but provide a percentage split as to these additional expenses. So the court may say that when it comes to those soccer expenses, they'll be divided on a 50-50 basis. Or if the parties have a very disparate amount of income, it may be a 70-30 split or a 60-40 split. Other categories other than extracurriculars include extraordinary medical expenses.
Yeah.
That includes dental and vision typically. There's educational expenses, so expenses associated with school, high school, and so forth, as well as religious expenses. Those are the four major categories that the courts have outlined for guidance. Moving on to another question,
Okay.
which is, okay, I have a child support obligation. Can it ever change? Can it go up? Can it go down?
Nope, absolutely not. You're stuck with whatever you get stuck with. No, I'm being a little facetious there. There's very little that I've run into that can't be changed in divorce or family law. A lot of these statutes, the way they're written in a way that allows for change, because I think the legislator understands people's lives change, their jobs change, and all of these things. So the statute does provide for a substantial change in circumstances that you have to prove in order to modify it. But if you can come to court and say, listen, here's what I was making, as an example, 10 years ago when my child support was entered, now here's what I'm making now, and I can't afford to pay it, or the other party's making more, now we want some more support, you can come to court and ask for a modification of the support. But the caveat to that is you need to show that there's a substantial change in circumstances. And so, yeah, you can always modify the support obligation.
Okay. So, Leo, what is a substantial change in circumstances? If I'm making $1,000 more next
Yeah.
year, is that a change?
Well, and this is where, having an attorney is also important, because, the statute doesn't have a list of things that says, okay, if you have this change, it is substantial, and if it's this change, it's not, right? So a lot of it has to do with experience and going to court, and some appellate decisions that have been written where the courts kind of interpret what is a substantial change. So, in your example, $1,000 of increase or decrease in income, highly unlikely to be deemed to be a substantial change in circumstances. But something that is substantial, like for example, the paying parent, God forbid something happens medically and they can no longer work, or they can't do the job that they were doing previously, and let's say their income drops from a couple $100,000 down to minimum wage or something like that. And in that type of circumstance, I would say that would be a good candidate for a substantial change finding by the court to modify the support downwards. Other things also that it's not just financial, right? It could be if parents have one type of parenting schedule, for example, that they entered into, and now mom or dad got a job overseas and they have to take it, and now they're no longer here, not exercising the same parenting time. If there's a substantial change into the parenting schedule, or decision making also kind of goes into that. So if there's any of those kind of things, you can come in and modify. It doesn't have to always be financial.
Okay. And so, moving on to our next question.
So what does child support cover? And let's start with that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I have a lot of clients coming to me and they say, oh, well, I bought, pens and pencils for my child. Is that part of the child support component? Or is that an educational expense? Or what category does that fall into? How does it work? So the way that child support works is the court will provide a monthly amount. And the expectation is outside of the four categories that we outlined, extracurricular, educational, extraordinary medical, as well as religious expenses, the monthly support obligation should take into consideration most of the other expenses. The haircuts, the clothing. I mean, in a lot of households, right, each household will maintain their own set of clothing for the children, in the essence of a divorce, correct? And so, the court is not going to be interested in determining, who paid for the paper, who paid for, the video games, those components. This monthly support obligation is to take that into consideration. Now, that's not to say that the court can't deviate either upward or downward from that monthly support amount if it hears arguments as to why it should be different. For example, certain children may have different medical needs, increased medical needs, and the court may say, okay, well, I'm going to increase the monthly amount in part to take into consideration that this child requires more assistance, more time, more attention, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also, and you kind of mentioned this, but if you're negotiating an agreement with another side, with your spouse, and you have the base support and then these categories, extracurriculars, school expenses and all that, you can agree to include certain expenses into those categories. So for example, school expenses, well, what does that mean? Does that mean, prep classes for SAT and ACTs? Does it mean college applications, a limit on those? So you can kind of negotiate that and put a certain amount of, maybe it's 2 applications or 1 prep class per year for, junior and senior year in high school. So you can control that. Cell phone expenses, I've seen people agree to split cell phone expenses 50-50, laptop expenses for school. So if you are doing an agreement and you have an attorney, you can kind of bring these things up and kind of control and be more specific to your needs and to your kind of lifestyle and what you want to provide for the kids.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the primary question, which is, how do I calculate the support amount?
Okay.
How do I know how much I'm going to pay in support?
Okay, so the base support is based on each party's income. We kind of talked based on that. So, and the formula talks about net incomes. The statute is very clear on what net income is, and the simple answer is basically your gross income minus your required taxes and contributions to Social Security, those kind of things. And so the statute defines it, and then once we know what your net income is, we put it in the formula. We look at those tables that I kind of discussed and see what the child support for a pair of parents that make X amount of net income per month is, and then you find the number of children they have, and then you get a support amount, and then each party then their percentage contribution to their combined net income is the percent the court kind of uses to apply to that child support number. That's the hard way of describing it.
Yeah.
The much easier way to do it is if you do hire an attorney who's competent. Most people use online software that we have. We put in your gross income. If you're a W-2 income earner, we put that in. The software calculates the taxes for whatever given year you're in. So for example, for 25, the software will know what the tax brackets are. It'll spit out a net number and it'll give us a child support amount. And then you can put in other factors like we discussed, overnights, are we at 146 or less overnights? If it's less than 146, it really doesn't matter. The child support's gonna stay the same. If you're over 146, the software calculates that and offsets that amount based on the correct number.
And since you got one bonus question, I'll take one bonus question as
sounds
well,
good.
which is tax deductions.
Yep.
Who gets to claim the children, right? Maybe one party doesn't have any parenting time at all, but they're paying child support. Do they get to still claim the tax claim?
My experience is that if both parties are contributing to the children through child support and whatever the other categories are, courts usually try to split those. So if you have 2 kids, maybe the court lets each child be claimed by one parent and the other child by the other parent, and then if one child phases out, then they alternate. If you have one child, maybe you alternate that tax exemption every other year. If you want to get really creative, you can, if you're doing an agreement, you can put in there that, if both parents are earning income that's taxable, or if it's a tax benefit, then they alternate. But if one parent doesn't get any tax benefits from the alternating, then you let the other parent claim it every year until the other parent gets a benefit, so that you're maximizing, the tax benefits to both parents. So there's different ways of doing it, but yeah, you would share that in a way as long as you're both contributing to the child support and all the other expenses.
Right, even if you don't have parent time, for example,
right, yeah.
or if you have equal parent time.
Yeah, because you're still contributing, yeah.
Correct. And so I think this was very wonderful. Thank you for coming on.
So first episode.
Yeah, and I plan on doing different topics so that if maybe child support doesn't apply to your case specifically because there's no children involved, we'll do a session as it pertains to spousal support, maintenance, alimony. We're going to do sessions as to assets, right? Who gets the house and so forth. And so there's a lot to look forward to.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it, Marty.
If anyone ever has any questions that they want to share, you can always reach out to our firm, Stern Mendez, call the main office line, and request either Martin Sliwinski or Leo Sokolov, and we'd be happy to schedule a consult and answer any and all questions.
Yeah, I think maybe what we can do is if we get the same question that we haven't covered, maybe in like 6 months we can do like a user submitted question or client submitted questions since the podcast started and kind of run through those.
Yeah, absolutely. Revisit a topic, right? And
Yeah.
say, look, we're getting a lot of these questions as well, and we want to address them for everyone.
Yeah.